get that going. Perfect. Might pop up on everyone's screen to acknowledge that it's being recorded. So my name is Emily Hendrickson. I'm the current president of the Women's Mining Coalition, and we are very excited today to do our first ever webinar of this type, providing a summary of our recent Washington, D.C. fly-in that we had in April. And so today we'll primarily be speaking myself, Haley Rember, our vice president, and Lindsay Wright, our manager. On the call is most likely many of our board members, advisory council members, WMC members, and so lots of experts on the phone. And if anyone has questions or comments throughout the presentation, if you could please utilize the Q&A function, which should be live if everyone can see that. And then there's a chat function as well. So plop your questions in as you have them, and we will get to those at the end and we've left some time for discussion. So did I miss anything, Lindsay, or you think we're good to go?
I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. So we will go ahead and advance to the next slide. So what we'll be talking about today, we'll introduce ourselves, Women's Mining Coalition, and your speakers today. We'll talk just a bit high level about how the WMC affects change, how we organize these fly-ins, what the strategy really is behind the meetings we're securing, who we place in specific meetings, how we prepare our members, all that good stuff. We will speak about who joined us for our 31st annual fly-in to DC, who our participants were, kind of what sectors they represented, different levels of expertise. And then we'll go into, we had recently released a fly-in survey, a participant survey. And so we'll review some of the results and feedback from participants in that survey. We will dive into the issues that we discussed with decision makers during the fly-in. So diving into some of the legislation, proposed rules, just some of the key issues that were in our talking points in our packets. We'll talk about the effort we placed this year on engaging with agencies and the really fantastic outcomes we've seen with that. We'll share our promo video, and then we will talk about what is next for the WMC. We have a lot of follow-up items after, we always do after a fly-in, but this year seems especially exciting. So if you don't know us, the WMC, our mission is to advocate for our modern and domestic mining industry. We believe it's essential to our nation, and what we do is we gather women from across the country, across coal and hard rock, everything from exploration and development to closure, reclamation, operations. We really try to get a diverse perspective of women from across the industry, speaking to decision makers about how the decisions they're making, the policy they're implementing affects real people on the ground. So we were formed by 3 female geologists in 1993. When we were starting to see some of the first attempts to change the U.S. mining law. And so that year, I forget, Lindsay or Haley, if you recall what Debbie said, that first year they actually went to D.C.
Six times,
bringing women every time, just going and grabbing more and bringing them, and really made a huge impact on that. We continue to fight a lot of that same fight today, and we'll talk about that as we get into those issues. But every year, with the exception of a couple of years around COVID, the WMC has flown back to DC with a contingency of women from across the industry to share our stories. And so we have about 200 members nationwide, and again, representing all sectors of the industry. Sorry, go ahead. So again, just to introduce a little bit more who we are, you've got your executive committee here, myself as president, Haley as vice president, our secretary is Lynn Volpe, and our treasurer is Cami Pren. Lindsay Wright is our manager, our sole employee, and we couldn't do any of this without her. And then we have our board of directors as well, and we also have an advisory council that serve as subject matter experts for issues as we need them. All right, and I think this is where I pass it to Haley, maybe?
Yep, thank you, Emily.
Perfect.
So I'm going to start off with how the Women's Mining Coalition affects change on Capitol Hill. Go ahead, Lindsay. As Lindsay As Emily mentioned, the Women's Mining Coalition was founded in 1993 and has really primarily focused on bringing together very diverse groups of women from across not only the industry, but the country to share our stories and our experiences to help educate and provide awareness to lawmakers on the critical importance of mining in our country, communities, and our families. We just had our annual Washington, D.C. fly-in and this is occurred for the past 31 years where we have focused and primarily succeeded in successfully promoting helpful legislation and defeating harmful bills to the U.S. mining and mineral sectors. We have amplified awareness and advocacy for our members' projects, ensuring that their voices are heard and that their initiatives are being supported. We also have influenced positive outcomes for the industry at the state and federal levels. As you can imagine, we are not who lawmakers are used to seeing when somebody comes to talk to them about mining. Go ahead, Lindsay. How we do it. The key elements of the Women's Mining Coalition is that we prioritize deploying diverse perspectives and areas of expertise. We focus on coordinating with our affiliate organizations across the hard rock and the coal sectors, where our messages on issues can be collaborated through engagement, but they still very much remain unique to our organization. The Women's Mining Coalition focuses our engagement by balancing both the quality and quantity of our meetings to be very, very intentional, as does our structure and prioritization for who is really participating in each and every of those meetings. As we all can assume, when we're meeting with states, it does matter who's in those meetings. If you are from there, if you have a connection to the state, as well as other deployable sectors. Our relationships and follow through is a very important nexus to our organization, i.e. follow up, and then we follow up again. The key here being that we are promoting the Women's Mining Coalition as a helpful, reliable, and most importantly, a reputable resource. It's also a very critical element that we find common ground, which may not always be easy around the mining and resources sector, but also able to focus on education, workforce, supply chain, permitting, especially as NEPA and its process is a part of some of the very diverse, varied sectors across our country. And at the end of the day, on some issues, we just have to be willing to simply agree to disagree. Consistency in our messaging and our actions, as well as continuing to be a viable resource for our industry, our partners, as well as lawmakers to look to. One might ask how in the world we prepare for a fly-in. This year, we took a little bit of a different approach. So pre-fly-in, the Women's Mining Coalition provided 4 training webinars for our participants and our members this spring, including a Mining 101 webinar, all of the above energy strategy, federal state regulation issue webinar, and the power of advocacy and general fly-in information webinar. We very much strategically focused on empowering our Women's Mining Coalition committees and subject matter experts in order to draft our organization's issues papers. We coordinated with our affiliate hard rock and coal organizations on issues for very much intentional alignment. And on Monday, for all of our participants, we dove in with a half-day training and orientation session, which included 2 phenomenal presentations, one from Holland and Hart and another from Ioneer. In order to prioritize the time and resources, we have a very, very dedicated and detailed scheduler. Lindsay Wright's attention to detail and strategy were of great value of success for not only our fly-in, but to our entire organization. We also provide networking opportunities for all of our participants, our affiliate organizations, to really get together and engage. In involving our sponsors, who are really a critical resource to the Women's Mining Coalition, we provided opportunities for them to present, collaborate, and also participate within the fly-in itself.
All right. So who joined us in Washington, D.C. this year on the participant side of things? Go ahead, Lindsay. So we had 31 women join us this year, and we were incredibly excited by the diversity of those who did join us. We had everyone from the original founding members of the WMC, many who have been on 10+ years worth of fly-ins, brand new folks joining us for the first time, even some students, university recruiters. The university recruiter was an incredible resource to have, especially when we started speaking about mining schools, Bill. And just having, I think there was one meeting I was involved in, and we had myself kind of representing exploration developer, we had an operator, we had a university recruiter, and an association representative. And I just paused in the middle of that meeting. It was like, wow, this is exactly what we're going for here. With this member being able to talk about all of these issues from all of these different perspectives is so powerful, and it really helped our message be well received. So that's a huge piece of what we do. We had members that were able to represent all 50 states. As Haley mentioned, a lot of these meetings we don't get unless we can say that we have a constituent for that state in our meeting or in our group. And so that was really important. We were especially grateful to have that come from the supplier and vendor side as well. That's a really important aspect. While there is mining in every state, or some element of mining happening in every state, who reaches out into each state in the United States the most would be those suppliers, vendors. So one of the big ones this year, having a representative from Caterpillar, was a really huge benefit for us, and we were grateful to her for joining us. And then on the expertise side, so not just which sector do you work in, but what do you do? We had a really good diversity in that group as well. Everything from the permitting and environmental side, law, engineering, geology. We had all of our comms, stakeholder engagement people, ESG, and corporate leadership. Really were able to speak to these issues from many different angles. And as you can see here, we had a lot of fun too. So the last 2 years, we have rolled out a fly-in participant survey. A lot of the pre-fly-in preparation and training that Haley mentioned with the webinars and all of that good stuff came out of feedback that we received last year. A lot of the times the issue papers that we are creating, even the schedules themselves, have to be created very close to when we actually deployed the fly-in. Lindsay can attest that sometimes the scheduling, they won't even look at scheduling you out more than 2 weeks in advance. So tailoring the messages to specific audiences is a little bit of a dance, as are the issues, right? These things are constantly changing. We're in session, Congress is in session, so bills are moving and changing. And so what's important is that we provide background contextual information as far out from the fly-in as we can, which you saw with our webinars. And then we were still able to provide our issue papers much earlier than in previous years, which was really exciting. But so for this year's participant survey, we asked a lot of the same questions. We had 17 or 18 respondents to the survey at the time that I pulled this together. And so one of the big ones being WMC communicated with me adequately before, during, and after the fly-in. Very strong agreement on that, most strongly agreeing. We, in addition to all of those trainings, I know Haley, Lindsay, and myself were having individual calls with participants or potential participants just to even talk about, okay, how do you, get your flight booked? How do you utilize the metro system in DC? What do you pack? What do you wear? All of that really important information when it's your first time going to DC. We really wanted this to be accessible for everyone. Feeling comfortable speaking to the issues included in the packets is always a challenging one because, as I mentioned on the last slide, this is not all of our day jobs. You have engineers and consultants and permitting specialists and all that, and a metallurgist isn't, typically talking about pieces of legislation in their day-to-day work. So there's always that level of not feeling entirely comfortable about the issues right out the gate. But one thing that we always really prioritize is placing new participants with veterans in their meeting. So we never put a new participant out on their own. They're always with at least one veteran or more senior participant. And I think we typically see, and I'm sure many on the call who've been to a fly-in can relate, that the first day is a little bit scary and a little bit intimidating, but by day 2, you've got it. You've got your message down. You're starting to feel which messages work well, what you personally feel confident speaking to, what story, to really personify the messages you're speaking to. We really see people get into a groove quickly. That's also because there's just in so many meetings, and repetition is very helpful. And then feeling comfortable with the team leaders, something we are, again, also very, very sensitive to. This is a very intimidating thing for people to do. Again, this is not their day-to-day work. So ensuring that the veterans that are in those groups, the leaders in those groups, are making sure that everyone has the opportunity to speak if they feel comfortable speaking, to introduce themselves, to share their story. That's what we're there for. So, doing more and more education with our veterans and our more senior members to help them be sure they're including people is always a big priority for us. And then the biggest indicator of how we did is, are you interested in attending next year's fly-in? And overwhelmingly, we got yes answers. The maybes context behind those was, making sure I get company approval and all of that good stuff. But everyone who responded has an interest in attending next year. Yeah, Lindsay.
Just to add to what Emily has said, on one of them that I felt comfortable speaking to the issues included in the WMC provided packets. This really is the big one that I think people become uncomfortable with. I was in my first year. I doe-eyed into offices and barely spoke in my first couple of meetings. But one thing I would also recommend doing is to get more involved in the WMC by joining certain committees. We have the Congressional Communications Committee, which is a very integral part of our organization. Debbie Strusacker, Laura Scare, Kathy Suda, these women who are very tenured in our industry and have been going to fly-ins for years. They lead these committee meetings, and throughout the year, they are keeping you updated on what is going on in at the federal level and sometimes even at the state level, because they all are from different states and know what's going on around the country. So I highly recommend, especially those who have been to the fly-in this past year or are looking to go to the fly-in, if you just to sit on these calls and absorb the information and then raise your hand and ask questions will absolutely help prepare you, because everything that's happening will lead up to the fly-in and you will already have that background knowledge. So I definitely recommend getting more involved and becoming part of a committee, the energy committee as well. They're the ones who put together the all of the above energy strategy and paper. You have a lot of coal experts in that group, and they're a great group of women, and again, all industry leaders, all very well knowledgeable in these subjects. The second thing, just a request for anyone who's on this call who hasn't had a chance to do the survey, even though we have presented this information, this is super helpful for myself, Emily, and Haley. We do have discussions about this. We're not going to, give your information out if you feel like you have, a negative thing to say. It will help us do better. I mean, last year, the feedback that we got changed the way we did things this year, and we are super grateful for it. And we want to hear the negative, not always the positive. The positive is great, but the negative will definitely help us do better. Yeah, that's all I have for right now.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. And that kind of leads into the next slide a bit with some of the more detailed feedback we received through the survey. So we asked a number of questions, but kind of the two most prevalent for our presentation today is, what are some of the favorite parts of the fly-in, and those suggestions for next year, as Lindsay mentioned. So let's start on suggestions for next year, actually, since we're talking about being proactive and getting engaged in committees throughout the year. One of the biggest suggestions that we get every year, whether we've done a formal survey or not, is that those boots on the ground, a haul truck driver, a welder, a mechanic, those real women who work in the industry and maybe get dirty every day for a living, really are so powerful to have with us in DC. And that is really important as we speak to our companies who sponsor, who send people to join us on the fly-in, our sponsoring companies, all of us who attended the fly-in, as we go back to our organizations and we talk about our experience and talk about who should come to the fly-in. That's kind of the question. Who goes to this sort of thing? It's not just your government affairs team or your external affairs people or your lawyers or whatever. The real power in what we do is by just amplifying those stories of women across the industry who people are not typically expecting to see in that meeting. So I remember my first or second fly-in ever. I brought with me from Kinross a heap leach pad supervisor. And I mean, that just took over the entire meeting, just asking about, wow, what does that even mean? What does your job entail? She got to talk about the safety aspects of it, the type of people who are coming into those heap leach pad operator roles. That was really, really fascinating for the offices to hear about. So please just remember that any representation from across the industry we can get, not just those professional roles, is very important to our mission. More suggestions were more student engagement. We were really excited to have one student join us in DC this year, as well as the student recruiter from UNR. And the more we can get students involved and engaged in that, hearing a young person tell the story about why they want to get into this industry, especially as we're talking about education and workforce development, is incredibly powerful. And then the more education on issues throughout the year, following the Senate Natural Resource hearings, things like that. That is all stuff that we are really prioritizing through membership engagement throughout the year, through our webinars, through our committee structure. We're looking at, and we'll talk about that at the very end of the presentation, kind of how we are wanting to get more member engagement through our committee structure. But as Lindsay said, just really getting kind of oriented with the organization, immersed into our committees, really will just help you stay kind of cued in and engaged. This is stuff that, builds all year long, that factors into our messaging when we go to DC in the spring, and it's really critical and helpful to have your finger on the pulse throughout the year. And then another suggestion was to do kind of a daily, we have networking receptions and gatherings and things, but having a daily debrief opportunity, or even just, okay, hey, well, I'll be here in the lobby, come check in if their schedule changes, whatever. That was another suggestion from the survey. But overall, favorite parts of the fly-in, far and beyond, it's the networking opportunities, the opportunities to meet women from across the industry, to kind of interact with people who are dealing with a lot of the same struggles you are, sharing best practices. That's always a highlight for everyone who attends our fly-in, and you can see that as well from the quote there from one of our participants. The opportunity to meet affiliate organizations. This year, I mean, we had AEMA, NMA, MMSA, all of these different affiliate organizations. We had state associations, coal associations, everyone kind of all in one space. That's a really unique opportunity to engage directly with some of these other organizations. And a lot of that happens through those receptions and networking opportunities. And then again, just the overarching feeling of making a positive impact for your industry, and taking an active role in advocating for the things that we do, I think is really empowering. I think we're on back, flipping over to Haley.
So we're going to now transition over to the fly-in issues that we discussed this year. Go ahead, Lindsay. First, I'm going to go over the engaging with the federal government. So really kind of evaluating the current legislative and regulatory landscape. As we've mentioned several times already, the Women's Mining Coalition was founded in 1993 to fend off the attempts to enact industry crippling changes in regards to the mining law. And very much 31 years later, we are still continuing to fight that fight. Some big elements that we saw this year, in particular around the narrow partisan margins in Congress, and with the addition of it being an election year, politics can be very much making engaging and enacting legislation difficult, if not impossible. This absolutely leads to an increase in the administrative processes, such as what we have been seeing through both the executive orders as well as the agency rulemakings to achieve its policy and objectives. We're also seeing a lot of mixed messages. Congress has really earmarked billions for critical minerals, while administrative processes are being utilized to limit mining. Very much seems like we are receiving and then having things taken away at the same time. In addition, the widespread bipartisan acknowledgement of the critical needs for minerals, and that we are facing a dynamic risk on reliance on foreign adversaries. However, even with this, there still has not been a translation in seeing an acceptance of domestic mining here in the US. There is recognition that permitting delays really are affecting everything, not just mining, in all aspects related to multiple use of public lands. All in all, despite the widespread acknowledgement that minerals are indispensable for the nation's energy transition goals, the administration is still pursuing policies that impede mining and put important critical mineral deposits off limit to mining, either for future years or in perpetuity. Permitting delays are also adversely affecting everything, not just included proposed mining, but infrastructure, manufacturing, as well as renewable and conventional energy projects. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Okay, and so at the end of the presentation, we have the link to our website where you'll be able to go and find our issue papers. So what we do is we create several issue papers that focus in on specific topics, and then those go into packets that are left physically, and then we also follow up and send them digitally with all of the offices that we meet with. That includes the flying specific issue papers. We'll also include things like, some of our fact sheets and white papers that we create throughout the year, again, to just kind of demonstrate the WMC as a resource. And those are always very, very well received. And so what some of the pieces of legislation that are included in those issue papers this year. So we'll speak to, there's some Senate bills, the Mining Regulatory Clarity Act, or the Rosemont Fix, which really just restores and clarifies rights under the U.S. mining law, which were interpreted, we believe, incorrectly by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals during the Rosemont litigation. There's a companion bill in the House, which was brought to the House floor just after our fly-in. And during fly-in, actually, Haley, Lindsay, and myself were in a meeting with the Speaker of the House's office and received information that that bill was going to be brought to the floor at the end of April. And we were able to right away communicate that with our affiliate organizations to make sure everyone was prepared for that to come down. So that was a really exciting kind of direct result of the fly-in. So that was brought to the House floor and passed out of the House on May 8th, and then it was referred then to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So really positive to see some momentum with that piece of legislation, even during an election year. We'll see what happens with that now. Another one I mentioned earlier, which receives I would say there's two main topics that are receiving bipartisan recognition, or when we talk about finding common ground, we're really gaining some traction, and that would be the Mining Schools Act, and then anything related to permitting reform. As Haley, Emily, Haley, Lindsay are all basically the same name in my pea brain, so I'm messing them up 100% of the time. Don't worry. So Mining Schools Act, and then anything related to permitting reform. There was a meeting I was involved in last fly-in with Congresswoman's office who represented a district around San Francisco. And they were sharing their experience with us about trying to permit a homeless shelter, and it needed to go through the NEPA process. And so I think incrementally over the last several years, we've seen much more of an understanding overall and in a bipartisan manner towards kind of the challenges associated with the permitting process in the United States, not just as it relates to mining. And so that's one space where on both sides of the aisle, again, we have that recognition. It's not quite yet translating into action, but that's a huge step to get to that point. So Mining Schools Act of 2023 is a great one that provides funding for U.S. mining schools to recruit students and pursue research. And so we have mining schools across the country. We have some really kind of staggering statistics about the number of students enrolled in mining programs in the U.S. versus China. I think it's 1.4 million per year in mining schools in China, and about 600 students per year enrolled in mining programs in the U.S. And that's always a really poignant point for folks. And again, having students joining us this year and a student recruiter joining us this year really helped drive this message home. We were also able to talk about making some connections. I was involved in a meeting with an office representing Virginia, and they wanted to make connections with UNR and Virginia Tech and understand kind of Virginia Tech's perspective towards this bill. And they said, we just want to hear from Virginia Tech, and then we would feel comfortable supporting this bill. So we were able to help facilitate that connection and bring that member over to our side there. And then the Good Samaritan Pilot Liability Relief Program for cleaning up abandoned hard rock mines is another one we've been talking about for seems like many, many years. That we are seeing kind of more of an understanding, I would say, about what that program would look like. And then companion bills on the House side, another exciting one, the Western Economic Security Today Act of 2024, requiring BLM to withdraw their conservation landscape health rule, which we'll speak about here in a moment, did pass out of the House at the end of April and was also referred to Senate ENR at the beginning of May. Another key point, and this chart here to the right is something that the WMC has included in our issues papers, maybe for every single fly-in we've ever been on, but it's a really important point. This is the US's net import mineral reliance. So what the message we really framed around this year was the green graph here on the left is from 1995, and that's our net import reliance from 1995. And then we always present also the most recent chart. So you've got, and it's tiny on my screen, but 2023. And so just kind of showing that change in how our reliance on these really critical minerals is increasing. And that's always been a well-received message. Yeah, Lindsay.
I was just going to say, Emily, this one is small on the screen for, I think, for everybody, but we do have a one-pager on our website that you can go and get this. So it's one of Debbie Strusacker's favorite, and she helped put this one together. And so it's an important one for us, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of our framing around this issue this year, again, we have that understanding that we need these minerals, that we're getting too many of them from foreign adversaries, or that the US is just missing out on the economic opportunity that comes with producing these minerals. But framing it this year around one of the recommendations out of the Interagency Working Group on Mining Reform to create a federal agency, a strategic minerals agency. And so the WMC's point on this issue is the U.S. Bureau of Mines was defunded in 1996. And we can see that over the years, our reliance on these minerals has really kind of coincided with the defunding of that agency. And what the U.S. Bureau of Mines really did was serve as federal experts on mining and minerals issues. I will always talk about the IWG working group's visit to an operating mine in Nevada last December, where they asked, why did you put the mine here? And that really just highlighted, that question came after they published their report and all of their recommendations, right? But it really highlighted that even the working group to develop mining, reform objectives doesn't have that base level of understanding. So our federal government is really lacking in experts on mining and minerals issues, and a Bureau of Mines-esque agency would really serve that purpose. It would focus on research and development for extraction, processing, reprocessing, which was a big topic with some of our meetings with DOE, and reclamation techniques. And that coincides as well with this concept of centralizing and coordinating research. You have academia conducting research and development for better ways to process, more efficient processing, more environmentally friendly methods. The private sector doing that as well, right, for their own business objectives. But there's no one really pulling all of this together. And one great example of how the U.S. Bureau of Mines did that, which again we learned from Debbie Strusacker during the fly-in, was the U.S. Bureau of Mines is actually responsible for popularizing the heap leach cyanide process in the United States. They didn't develop that technology, but they proved it and got it implemented throughout the United States. And so having a centralized agency that can take all of this research that's being done, encourage that research, and really get it out to the larger industry while also advising the federal government when they're trying to change policy and things like that is really incredibly important. And again, this is a recommendation out of the IWG report that the WMC very much supports.
Can I say one thing, Emily, about it?
Please.
So just yesterday, myself, Sheree Leiden, we met with the National Energy Technology Laboratory team through the DOE. One thing that's really recognizable is that all of the agencies themselves, I think, understand that they need this, and they do their processes themselves, if that makes sense. So they're not coordinating together. And one thing we've heard, and I think that they are supportive of, is that the DOE would like to house this, whether it's a U.S. Bureau of Mines, whether it's something like it. They have sort of raised their hands of this is something they would prefer to be owning. I personally, and this is a personal opinion, agree that after some hearings I've seen in the past couple of weeks, that Secretary Granholm has gotten much more positive feedback, bipartisan, from especially from the Senate committee on the work that she's doing with the DOE. And so I think that we've had a lot of success in our conversations with the DOE, and they are very much supportive of every type of energy source and this U.S. Bureau of Mines. So something that we really do support through the IWG report, as Emily said. So that makes sense?
Absolutely. Okay, let me go to the next slide. Thank you. And so, as Haley mentioned, we are in an election year, and we're seeing a little bit of a discrepancy between maybe some of the messaging that's coming out of the administration versus what some of these policies that are being proposed and implemented are actually trying to achieve. Something that's very important about, and we mentioned it earlier, just in kind of how the WMC does this work, is that this is not just something we are doing once per year for a week or a few days when we go to DC. We are engaging on these issues all year long. So anytime there's a comment period open on any of these things, we are submitting white papers and just providing education throughout the year on these issues. We're engaging year round. And so when we go to DC, that's how we get to, say that we are the subject matter experts. And so some of the rules that we spoke to, so again, we spoke about the legislation that's included in our issue papers, and then there are also administrative tools, policies that we spoke to in our issue papers as well. So all of these here, BLM's now finalized conservation and landscape health rule, which risks putting more lands off limits to mining and other multiple uses. And that's another big message we're always sharing in DC, is that when we're talking public land access, shared use of public land, that doesn't just affect mining. It affects our infrastructure, our grid, ability to build transmission lines. It affects the ranching community. Any renewable projects, solar, wind on public land. All of this kind of folds into that larger issue. And then we've got the Greater Sage Grouse Resource Management Plan Amendment, DEIS, which the WMC has submitted comments on, or is just about to submit comments. Lindsay, I don't know when those are going out or if they already have, but right around now, submitting comments on that. And that plan affects 121 million acres of BLM administered public lands in about 10 Western states. So a really huge swath of land that is considering being put essentially off limits due to sage grouse habitat. The SEC's natural asset class rule and the creation of natural asset companies is something that the WMC engaged on right away. And fortunately, that rule was rescinded, but we are seeing with BLM's natural capital accounting kind of attempts to effectively create natural asset companies through conservation leases, things like that, but in just kind of more subversive ways. We've also got CEQ's proposed NEPA rule, which effectively seeks to transform the National Environmental Policy Act into the National Environmental Protection Act, and really prioritizing protection versus shared use. This is really problematic because it allows new issues to be raised at any point, even after a record of decision has been made through the NEPA process. So that really disincentivizes engagement in that very transparent and public process, and just kind of encourages that back-end litigation that really does extend these permitting timelines and make projects uneconomic. Another big thing, and we can speak about this more too when we speak about our agency engagement as well, but we're seeing mining costs and the mining section of the supply chain kind of being excluded from a lot of these opportunities. So whether that be the 45X tax credit or anything related to battery manufacturing and processing, even some of the mandates out of some of the agencies we met with, it's supply chain and it's batteries and it's all these things, but it's manufacturing and processing on. And the mining piece of that, the materials that are needed to provide the feedstock for that process, are being entirely excluded, and including language in these rules saying that harmful industries like mining are not eligible for these funds. And so that's why this message about the complete supply chain and where these minerals come from is very important. And then we spoke a lot about the recommendations in the interagencies working group, as we discussed on the last slide with Bureau of Mines, but many other components of that, the recommendations that we do and don't like. And then again, overall, just mine permitting delays, mineral leases being revoked, land withdrawals, all that good stuff. I think we're back over to Haley for the next slide.
Thank you, Emily. Another hot topic for us is the energy strategy and grid reliability. As you can imagine, we do a lot of educating about coal, its uses, and its role in the energy stage. I will point that we are very, very grateful to our WMC board members, advisory role members, and energy experts here who really lead this charge for us at WMC. So we have a lot of jack of all trades, master of some. Coal is not mine. So forever grateful for those that we have as a resource. One of our biggest messages here when educating on energy is that thermal coal really is essential for life, as it is economical for both developed as well as developing countries. Coal is also an abundant resource worldwide, and I want to note that the United States has roughly 25% of the world's coal reserves. Coal also provides the three critical keys of energy: that it is secure, it's affordable, and it's reliable. Coal is also available to be ramped up when renewable energies are unavailable. Coal is also a key component when the grid is essentially less secure, so without needing a buffer between supply and demand. For all of us who are not coal experts, let's just allude to the point that everybody really cares about their energy and power sourcing when you don't have it. Coal is really able to fill that gap between extreme weather conditions as well. And I also want to point that coal provides an ample, reliable baseload power source. So this is needed not just for everyday life, but extremely important in regards to both mining and processing of critical minerals and materials. There has really been major regulations from EPA around power plants and specifically around air and water regulations that you can see here. The regulations have made it very much more difficult to run older baseload power plants and to replace those power plants with the same or similar fuel source for the new plants. The newer plants are less able to deal with the increase in power demand due to their inability to be essentially ramped up or ramped down in generating power. And they really run into issues if they rely on just-in-time deliveries of natural gas. So that is a very big concern during extreme weather conditions, i.e. when we all really care if we have power or not. I will go in a little bit around the CCUs, so carbon capture, utilization, and storage, essentially providing three key targets for energy strategy and grid reliability in regards to investment, positive impacts, and opportunities. So an investment opportunity with CCUs, so the cost of these have really decreased with the technological advancements and also with projecting costs to be even going down even further. The positive impacts is that there is potential option for gigaton carbon mitigation. The CCUs also provide job creation and retention. And we also hold a transition-ready workforce. 3 key opportunities within CCUs is that there are ongoing and increased research being around development and funding sources for this, as well as an extension of the 45Q tax credit. And it essentially is closing the cost gap between 45Q, direct pay, and other areas of criteria. Next.
Haley, can I say one thing about this slide? So
Absolutely.
just for everyone's information, in the past couple of days, what you'll see here too on the right side is a quote from CEO Michelle Bloodworth. So one thing to recognize, I think, from listening to DC is that I think that it actually is a bipartisan issue. I think that the message that you're usually seeing is that coal is bad and we need to get rid of it. Just this morning, and I'm not going to quote him because I forgot it, but Manchin in his opening remarks of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee hearing brought up the fact that, you know, we need coal. We need it until, like, everyone agrees that we're moving towards this clean energy future. But if we move too fast, it's going to affect, he's from West Virginia, it's going to affect his constituents. The ones that are probably going to suffer the worst are those that don't have the funds to cover those costs because of the implications that will occur for his constituents. So it is very much a bipartisan issue that they believe in all of the above energy strategy, at least from my understanding of his opening remarks this morning. And then what's frustrating, I think, for them is that they are passing these acts through Congress, and then the EPA is coming out with these regulations that are counterintuitive and they contradict what they're trying to do. And so Wendy is on this call. Wendy, if I've spoken out of turn in any way, please raise your hand. She is our board member, coal specialist, and probably could say a few things. Is allowing you to speak yet, Wendy? Hold on. Unmute yourself, Wendy, and see, is it letting you go? Oh, I missed. This is my fault. I'm sorry. It's saying allow mic, but it's not working. I don't know why.
Okay, wait, am I there
There
now?
we go. There we
Okay.
go. Perfect.
I think you've both done a great job really describing the situation. And I think one of the things that I've seen shifting in the last, decade of being involved with the Women's Mining Coalition is that there's a recognition of the people who actually run the grid, that as we get a penetration of 30% or so renewables or intermittent power, that it makes it more difficult to run the grid effectively, and certainly can put the grid in crisis when there's extreme weather events, as you guys have discussed. So it's important, I think, for us, and it's good for us to talk about just the reliability issues that we have. We got another blow from not just EPA, but now BLM on saying they aren't going to allow coal leasing in the Powder River Basin anymore, which effectively is the largest coal basin on the planet. So I guess I would say I'm sure that the Chinese and the Russians are thrilled that we're cutting our own throats on energy supply. But I think you've done a great job, discussing this issue. And I think one of the talking points I think that people forget about is it shouldn't be a war on coal. It should be a war on carbon dioxide emissions if climate change is your issue. And in that case, if it's a crisis, then we really should be dedicating making policies to encourage carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And certainly there's a lot of work going on in Wyoming and all over the planet on that. But the rest of the planet is going to continue to burn coal because it's available and effective. And so if we really want to make a difference with climate change or carbon capture, we've got to get that technology figured out. I saw that I think Elizabeth just asked a question about what the 45Q tax credit is. And so it's a tax credit if you capture carbon and you permanently sequester it in geologic storage. It pays you a tax credit back. And so it's a two-tiered thing. If you just shove it in the ground for no purpose, then you get paid $85 a ton. And if you shove it in the ground to do enhanced oil recovery, you only get $60 a ton or something like that. But it's to encourage those technologies. So I'll shut up now.
Thanks so much, Wendy. We appreciate that. We love Wendy. She sits on our board, and this is why we appreciate her, is because she'll jump in at any time. I will say this too. In the morning, right now, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee hearing has happened this morning, and on the electric power in the US, I highly recommend people to watch the video in the morning, put it on the background. That's usually what I do. It'll come out in the morning coffee news. So if you want to check that out, I will share that in the morning coffee news.
Thank you. Again, Lindsay, can you go back really fast?
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Wendy, for jumping in as a coal expert extraordinaire. We are very, very fortunate to have Wendy and others like her. I think one important point that I do want to point to this slide in particular around is when we vary in our state-to-state meetings, as it should be very glaringly obvious that affordable power and available power sourcing in, i.e. Idaho, might be very different than Alaska. When we start meeting with, the representatives or staffers and really starting to engage, it's really easy to slap on a label like affordable power, reliable power. But what does that mean? And what does that mean on the local level? And I think that's one of the best things that we have in those very diverse one-on-one conversations, is that each state is facing a different challenge. That's all the same challenge, but it's a little bit more localized, and being able to relate on that is very important. I will also point out that not only from an energy strategy is it important that it is affordable, that it is reliable from the mining and milling processing perspective, but let's all talk about the building a mine and what it costs to actually run one of those plants and the needs for these. So as a nation, as we start recognizing, the demand and that we want to mine domestically, and then we need to provide the resources here, power very much plays a critical role in that arena, because affordable power is the utmost important, especially from a cost perspective, and actually not just finding those resources, but getting them out of the ground and into the capacity in which our nation needs.
Haley, Emily, we have about 5 minutes left, just FYI.
So next I will go rather quickly. So we focused especially this year on building bridges with the agencies. The Women's Mining Coalition, we met with representatives and leadership teams from the Department of Homeland Security. We met twice with varying offices of Department of Energy, so the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, MESC. For those who don't know, MESC's jurisdiction includes the mineral processing and manufacturing, but it excludes exploration and mining. And then we also met with Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, so FECM, and they have the responsibility for the upstream mineral exploration and mining segments of the supply chain. So both within DOE, very much different teams, objectives, and prerogatives in which they operate. So that was the critical point in meeting with both of them. And then we also met with the U.S. Forest Service. A key focus was in place around the understanding of the mandates, not only for the Women's Mining Coalition, our partners and our proponents, but also, quite frankly, for them to understand their mandates and what some of those ramifications, those implications can mean for the developing projects and the operators right now. And we really are grateful for those meetings. We've had tremendous success. We are following up as a key contingency with continuing that dialogue. So the Women's Mining Coalition is engaging with quarterly meetings with Department of Homeland Security, as well as the much needed targeted follow-up meetings with both of the DOE teams on varying issues. So whether that is from the exploration, targeting, getting it out of the ground, manufacturing, supply chain side of things, we're very much going in with a broad fishnet there. And the Women's Mining Coalition is also focused and engaged with the response, so that with the MEC's RFI on critical materials and market dynamics. We very much are seeing, that exploration funding is, an incentivized, it's a budget line. They're trying to provide the sources in really finding those resources, but carrying out the projects, we're definitely trying to iron out the learning curve. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Okay, and just wanted to take one more moment to thank all of our sponsors listed here. You were recognized all throughout the fly-in. In the packets that we left with offices, this left poster here was on a flyer that was included in all of those packages. So every single office the WMC met with saw your name. When we had a meeting with DHS in the NMA office, our poster was up there, so they all got to see you. Social media recognition. I just want to encourage our sponsors. We appreciate you so, so much. And the more we can get you engaged in the development of the issues that we are speaking to in DC, what things WMC is commenting on and participating in throughout the year. We have tomorrow, right, our webinar with Ioneer as they are in their DEIS comment period. So looking to see how we can activate the WMC's network to provide comment in their NEPA process. So really, we are doing a lot of work, and we'll speak about that on the last slide very briefly. But just in engaging our sponsors and seeing what you need from us, our corporate members all throughout the year. But we just truly could not do this fly-in without you. And so thank you so much. I would also like to thank specifically Cherie Leeden for her work in really kind of going out there and soliciting sponsorships for the fly-in this year. We couldn't have done it without her. So thank you. And then this next slide, I'll just speak to it because we don't have time to watch the whole thing. But please check out our LinkedIn page, or maybe Lindsay, if you want to drop the link to this video in the chat or something. Not to put you on the spot, because I know you don't have it probably in your clipboard. But Lindsay put together this really wonderful video that showcases all of our fly-in participants this year and their experience with the fly-in. So I encourage all of our participants, as well as you report back to your organizations about your experience, to please share this video with them. And it really kind of helps them see and feel what this fly-in experience is really like.
Uh-oh. No, I didn't mean to do that.
Just click again.
No, stop. Oh, I'm failing, like, badly. It won't let me go to the next slide without playing it. No. Okay, I'm really sorry, everyone. This is just showing my...
Maybe click your arrow twice, your right arrow twice.
I am. When I click it on the screen, it just plays the video.
Okay, I would exit. Stop
Hold
screen
on.
sharing, and then
Oh no, I'm failing very much.
Lindsay, you should also be able to just move the toggle at the bottom of the video all the way over, so you don't have to watch it. You could push play, move it, and then it'll progress it for you.
This is really sad. I'm really sorry. I have no idea how to get it to stop.
in your the slide view, if you click on the next slide after that and then share screen once you're on the next slide.
It's on full screen. That's what I'm.
You should be able to click exit full screen.
I'm escaping. I promise. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank goodness. Sorry. I'm so sorry,
You're okay.
everyone.
Videos. That's why I'm like, it's a Hail Mary to even throw a video into a Teams presentation.
Okay, here we go.
Perfect.
Sorry,
all right. So we'll spend just our last couple minutes, and sorry we've gone a little bit over, but just some of the next things WMC is working on, and I will throw that to Lindsay to speak to, because a lot of this is she is driving.
Yeah, so this is my end of year goals. No, I'm just kidding. So next on WMC's horizon, we are currently working on a new website, which we're really excited about 75% complete. We are going through the last stages of development right now, but really looking forward to that, and we'll launch sometime in the next probably month. Quarterly DHS meetings, like Emily had mentioned, or Haley had mentioned, we had an initial meeting with the DHS in DC, and now we are continuing those. The conversation is about supply chain and the issues around that. as example, Jennifer Riley from UNR sat in that meeting, and even just supply chain of people, right? And having students and having, that is something that the DHS was very interested in hearing about. And then the correlation to the Mining Schools Act and understanding how all of it flows together. So DHS is very much looking for an education on mining in general, because some of them just don't know the full picture of what goes on in our industry. Targeted DOE meetings with certain offices. We had, like I said, we had one yesterday. And we'll continue those. We have one tomorrow with a different office that actually, as we had these conversations in DC, one thing was really nice is that if, based on their mandates, if certain offices could not speak on a certain idea or topic that we wanted to kind of recommend, they would say, you need to talk to this person. And then they would tie us to that person who now we have conversations with, which has been an amazing opportunity for the WMC to get in front of the heads of certain offices to give them our ideas, which they truly appreciate and are taking our suggestions in the way that they're operating. Webinar series, we have continued to do more webinars this year. We will try to continue to do them, just like the Ioneer one tomorrow. We ask that if anyone would like to participate, please register. If you have any questions on anything or you have issues, let me know. Member speaking engagements, we've had opportunity for a lot more speaking engagements this year. For example, myself and one of our board members, Kathy Suda, we will be presenting in front of a team at ORMAT on mining claims, and they are in geothermal, but they are interested in understanding how the mining industry works at that basic level. And so this is a great opportunity for us to work with geothermal. I have been asked to present at a conference at the end of the year in Pittsburgh on the Industrial Decarbonization Conference with Reuters Events. Emily Arthen from American Coal Council, who is one of our affiliates and an advisory council member. She also used to do my job, is also speaking at that as a moderator. And so just these great opportunities to get the WMC name out there, and we're really excited about it. Continued advocacy. Like Haley and Emily mentioned, we submitted the DOE RFI on critical materials yesterday. That was actually requested. They requested that we do that when we were in DC by the DOE's office. And so we obliged, and they were very grateful. Project NEPA comments, if you or your organization or you have colleagues that are going to be going through the NEPA process or any sort of permitting, and you need help from the WMC, please reach out to us. We are excited to help Ioneer and support them, and we hope that this, triggers this something inside of everybody to say, hey, WMC can help here. So definitely reach out if you have ideas there. Summer membership drive. We will this year be doing a corporate membership drive during the summer. We're going to now align everything to happen at one time. Something more administrative, but that will be happening, and you may see some notifications about it. Increased member engagement. This is something that I'm very kind of passionate about, is getting a lot more engagement in our membership. We have a great group of women who work closely with us on a daily basis, work with me on a daily basis, who I can lean on, but I think that sometimes that people tend to not want to participate because they may not have an idea, or they may think that they're not educated in a certain technical way. My background is in finance, and yet I'm listening to Senate hearings. And so if you have an interest or you have a certain skill that you think is great, please reach out to us. I mean, help with finance, IT. We're an organization that will, listen to any ideas, because I will listen to any ideas. If you want to send me an email, happy to do it. So definitely feel free to get more involved. And if you have any questions on it, please reach out. affiliate organization engagement. This one is super important to me as well. Like I mentioned with Emily Arthen, the CEO of the American Coal Council, because some of us myself, do lack the ability to speak on coal in a, I think, sometimes productive way. We definitely lean on these organizations, AEMA, NMA. They are great resources for us, and we're really looking forward to working with them more. So yeah, that's all I really got.
Wonderful.
Cool.
And then this slide, and I do see, Karen, your comment in the chat. I will just wrap up the presentation portion by saying, please visit our website to see our 2024 fly-in materials, our issue papers. I saw Tim's question in the Q&A as well. Yes, this is being recorded and will be posted to our LinkedIn page, right, Lindsay? And also go out via email to our membership. And like I said, we encourage you to share this far and wide. We would love to get the word out that WMC is doing this important work, and hopefully be able to be used as a resource by others as well. And so Karen's question, is there an opportunity to meet with Interior's officials given the director is coming up with new restrictions on coal and other potentially affected Interior agencies' lands? So we did attempt to secure a meeting with the Department of Interior in April for our fly-in, but did not receive a response to that inquiry, if I remember correctly. And Lindsay may have more context to that. So, but absolutely seeing DOI as a key agency to be engaging with. And I think it ties back in as well with our agency engagement strategy overall. So take the U.S. Bureau of Mines, for example, that previously existed under the Department of Interior. And just what we are learning about agencies and the roles that some other agencies are playing, like DOE, is that the best space for that agency moving forward in the future? So I think the strides we're making with DOE is really a positive outcome of the fly-in, and potentially at least under the current administration, more productive conversation to be having at this point. But Haley, Lindsay, feel free to add to that.
Yeah, I don't really have any further comments on it, but I agree, it was much more difficult. I will say this too, getting the difference between this year and in prior years we meet with just congressional offices. The idea this year and our strategy, Emily, Haley, and I, was that we wanted to expand into the agencies, given how much they are affecting our industry. We want to have that touch point with them. And so I'll be honest, it was literally reaching out to a woman on LinkedIn, and she was kind enough to accept our meeting invitation. And she happened to be one of the deputy directors of the organization, brand new, and she was really excited about meeting with us, and that has turned into other things. So very, I guess, holistic ways of doing it, if you will. We're trying to meet with certain people, but we also, I will say this too, great organizations like NMA and AEMA are tied into those agencies in ways that we may just not have the capacity to do, given our size and just that I'm the only employee and things like that. So there's different reasons why we select the meetings that we have and who we're meeting with. So just to give a little bit of more of a background on strategy behind it. So.
Okay, well, with that, just want to make sure I've captured everything in the Q&A. Yep, thank you, Lynn, for additional context. And absolutely, yep, we've met with agencies for sure in previous fly-ins, but especially understanding the context of election year politics this year, it was absolutely something we placed great emphasis on, and something we'll continue to do regardless of politics in years moving forward. So, okay, well, thank you all very much. We will end the recording now, and be sure that all the participants receive this link. Like I said, it'll be on our LinkedIn page, and we just encourage everyone to to share it. And thank you again to all of our participants who joined us this year. It's a lot to take a week out of your life, out of your work and family, and come to DC. We have a lot of fun, but it's a big lift. So we appreciate everyone who joined us, all of our affiliates who worked with us on our messaging and make sure that we're making progress. And then, of course, all of our sponsors. So thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your week.